Hello everybody, this is Sierra from Sierra T Designs, and today I have for you a mixed media butterfly slimline card. So let's jump right in. Now granted, this is a card that is not quite my normal, but please bear with me, I think it turned out pretty great. So for my card base, I have a piece of 120-pound cardstock because I wanted my base to be a bit hefty because I am putting quite a few layers on this. And I have a piece of Neenah Desert Storm and as well as a piece of 100-pound cardstock to build my layers on. So the 120-pound base, I have cut off 4 inches to create a 7-inch. So I have a 7 by 8.5 piece of cardstock for my base, and then for my 2 panels, my Neenah Desert Storm is my matte, and then my white piece of cardstock, I've taken off 1/8 of an inch to make the layers. Now it's not an exact measurement because my trimmer of course is only 6 inches, so I kind of have to eyeball it and then go back and forth a little bit, and then I'm scoring at 3.5 to make my 7 by 8.5 inch card base. And I did score on both sides because this is such a heavyweight piece of cardstock. I did score on both sides of the cardstock and then folded it over and then reinforced it with my Teflon bone folder, just because the cardstock is quite hefty, so I didn't want it to rip if I didn't kind of score on both sides. So then I took some Oxide sprays. I'm going to use Tumbled glass and spun sugar. And then you can see I have the leftovers. That's just an extra piece of watercolor paper that I keep on my desk whenever I do any kind of technique that involves like a watercolor, any kind of thing like that. And then I just kind of use it to scoop up any of the leftover color on my glass mat so that it's not really wasted. And then eventually I'll do something with that piece of cardstock. It's looking pretty cool. And that's just me randomly picking up colors that have been on my desk from different projects. So it's just kind of a way to not waste a bunch of color that's kind of pooling on my glass mat. And now, I will have everything that I'm using listed and linked down below. There are a few things that I've had in my stash for quite a while that I might not be able to find, but I will try to find you everything that I have used in this. So if you want to know anything about any of the products, they will be down below. So I also did take some of the same 2 colors, the tumbled glass and the spun sugar, and just kind of flicked them onto the colored panel. And while that's drying, I took the Simon Says Stamp Beautiful Butterflies stamp set. This was in a kit recently. And I'm going to stamp out 3 of the butterflies to watercolor with some Oxide inks. So if you've been with me for a minute, you know that I love the Oxide inks. And this piece of cardstock is, I believe it's a piece of Canson watercolor cardstock. Pretty sure that's what I used there. I used a bunch of different types of cardstock in this, so you'll have to forgive me. I don't always remember all of them. And I am going to heat emboss it with the Icicle, Brutus and Monroe's Icicle, which is their clear embossing powder. And I used Versafine Onyx Black ink to stamp down my images. And I just embossed them because I wanted to kind of do a really simple watercolor technique. And this kind of stops the color from bleeding into each side when you heat emboss it, because it kind of creates a bit of a crevice, like because they're raised lines, right? So it kind of creates this kind of pocket where your color can kind of just sit without blending into the other colors too heavily. So it's really useful if you're kind of trying for a simpler watercolor. And that's one thing that I really enjoy doing. I like doing watercoloring, so especially if I can make it a little bit easier on myself. And I did heat up my my heat tool. I heat up my heat tool for about 30 seconds before I brought it to the paper, just to prevent any warping, because I'm not going to tape this down, and I'm going to fussy cut out these images after we've watercolored them. There are matching dies for this. I do not own them, but I don't have any problems fussy cutting. I know some people really hate that, but I don't mind, so I just fussy cut out most of my images, but completely up to you as to what you prefer. So I do have a detailed watercolor brush here that I'm going to use to bring in my colors. And for my Oxide inks, I have Worn Lipstick, Cracked Pistachio, and I believe Mermaid Lagoon. Let me just check my notes. I don't even think I wrote it down, to be honest with you. I'm getting bad for that. I'm like, oh, I'll remember, it's okay. And then I totally forget. Broken China. I lied to you, I'm sorry. I used Worn Lipstick, Broken China, Cracked Pistachio. That's what I used to watercolor this. And I do use my little bit of my Distress sprayer just to spray a little bit of water onto the colors to get them to move. And then I just kind of paint them into random sections. And that's kind of really simple watercoloring. And it's 3 colors that I just really like, so they kind of really go well together. So this is part, I know mixed media is not generally something that I do often. I love it. It's a beautiful art. It's just that I'm not great at it. So I tend to shy away from it a bit. But recently there was in the Facebook group Handmade Happiness, if you guys know what that group is, or they had a mixed media madness hop. Courtney Keebler is running it, and I couldn't say no. I just so wanted to be a part of it because I just admire mixed media artistry, and it's just something that I need to push myself to do a little bit more. So I joined it. I'm super excited. If you want to check out the other people in the hop, I really encourage you to. They will be linked down below. There will be the first link in my description underneath this video. The next person in the hop, please go and check them out. Please give them some love. And if you see anybody in this hop that you love, please subscribe and give them a like and give them a comment and just tell them how amazing they are, because there's some amazingly creative people in these hops, and I'm just so honored to be a part of that. So please hop along, give them a love, give them a like, and that would be amazing. So we're going to finish up the coloring here. I like the detail water brush because it's quite a fine, as it says, detail. It's quite a fine nib. So it's really easy to kind of use with any of what color you're trying to lay down. So here, I didn't want to, sorry, this is really sped up. I'm sorry, that's a bit fast to see there. But I wanted to reuse any of the color that was still sitting on my glass mat. So I just wet it again and then put it into the side of the inside of the base. And then here I have a stencil, which was made by Hero Arts. I believe it was actually the planner stencil pair, and I just took the one that was a whole bunch of numbers. And I have some Tim Holtz texture paste. And I'm just laying some of that down onto the background that is now dry, with all that color kind of behind it. And I did use some Pixie Spray just to keep the stencil down because there were so many fine pieces. And now here, this is a piece of mixed media gauze. I got this at a Tuesday morning, 4 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that. Like, it was quite a while. So if I can find some or something, the exact same one or something similar, I will definitely have it linked. But yeah, I found this a long time ago and I've never used it. So I've just been kind of holding on to it, which is one of those things about art supplies. It's hard to give them up. And I kind of had this idea that my butterflies were going to be holding down this gauze. Don't ask me where this kind of came from. I don't know. I was just playing with all sorts of random supplies that I already owned. So this was just one of them, and I thought it would look really neat on a card, so I pulled it out. And we're going to bring out my splat box as well here in a second because I'm going to change the color of this gauze. But I also thought that if I took some brown twine and kind of tied it around the 3 points in which my butterflies would be holding it down, that would just kind of add a little bit of shape to the gauze so that it wouldn't just be one kind of similar shaped piece of gauze. It kind of, I don't know if that makes sense, but I didn't want it to be all one shape. So I tied knots around it to kind of add a little bit more, I want to use the word dimension, but that's not quite right. A little more shape to the gauze. I don't know if that makes sense, but I'm going to take some Frayed Burlap Distress Oxide spray, then I'm going to spray that on top of my gauze just to add a little bit of a better, like a different color. As I didn't want it, it's not completely saturated. You're going to see some of the, like the creamy white color that it already was, but I wanted to add a little more color and have it more kind of match the craft cardstock that I have underneath my panel. And then I also took a Tim Holtz Distress tool, and I'm just going to run along the sides. I'm also going to take my scissors and just add little snips and then kind of roll them just to make it a bit more textured, add a little bit more to the card so it's not this perfect piece of cardstock. And yeah, just kind of distressing it a bit, adding a little different. Like, I went all out here. If you guys have followed me for a while, you'll know that I tend to make more clean cards is maybe the way I would say that. Apparently my style has been described to me as a clean style. I'm not sure totally what that means, but I'll take it. I mean, who doesn't like their style to be fairly clean? I'll take it. And then I also have an Archival ink cube here in distressed, this is Black Soot. Those are all distress ink colors in just Archival minis. And I'm just adding a little bit of texture to the background. This is who made this one? Stampers Anonymous. I think it's Reflections is the stamp name, and it's just some script. and I just wanted to add a little bit more dimension to the background, a little bit more texture. And I just stamped right over top of that texture paste, which is now obviously dry. You wouldn't stamp on it before it was dry. And you can see that it kind of dried, and then some of the color of the distress inks that were on the background came through. So I just thought that that was really neat. You're going to have to let me know what you think of this card, guys, because it's pretty out of my norm, but I think it turned out pretty cool. I don't know, we'll see. We'll have to see what you guys think of how this came out, but I think it was a pretty interesting project. It was very different than my usual card making, but I like how it came out, so we'll have to maybe give this another go here down the road. So I tied on my twine. I didn't tie it very tightly, it's just kind of wrapped around, and then when I glue down the gauze to the card base, I'm going to glue it where the string is. Oh, yes, okay, I have a piece of, it's a tonic paper. I'm not 100% sure which paper it is. It's blue, but I love the black side, and it kind of brought a little more black into my image here. I just kind of was breaking up the background a little bit. I like how it looks. I actually forgot I did this, but yeah. I really liked the texture of this paper, and it's almost, if you've played with the tonic papers, it's almost a bit fabric-esque, if that lack of a better term for what it feels like. But I just kind of liked how it framed the gauze and the butterflies. And then I did distress it a little bit just so it wasn't quite a perfect cut, because it kind of was, like, I noticed that when I was looking at it, that it was a bit too perfectly cut, if that makes any sense. So I just wanted to distress it a little bit to kind of go with the back of my panel here that I have distressed. And I'm going to distress that a little bit more. You're not going to see it because I cut that out, but I distressed my cardstock a little bit more and added a few more kind of bigger cuts into it in a little bit. So I just used my Nuvo Deluxe glue because, you know, I love a liquid glue. They're so wonderful for sticking textured things down on top of other textured things. And I know that this does kind of cover my patterning a bit, but honestly it was the background, so it wasn't really what I wanted you to see, so I don't mind it. And here's I'm going to put the glue right over top of the string on the gauze to hold the string, so that it doesn't just let go once it's glued down. And I didn't do anything with those ends. I left them. I kind of like the, I'm not really rugged, but messy, I guess is kind of the right word there. Like the messy look of the string is kind of just hanging out and just being a part of the card. I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you think. This is such a different card for me that it's almost hard for me to kind of explain what I was thinking, because it's just not my norm. But I did decide to curve up the wings on the butterflies because the only point in which they'll be glued down is the center onto the top of the gauze. So I just like how that looked. I did use my reverse tweezers to kind of, well, do I actually use them to hold it? No, because I couldn't. Yeah. So I was going to use them, and then I realized, of course, the gauze is glued down, so there's no way I can use them because the gauze is glued down. You can't go underneath it. But the only place I added the glue was to the center of the butterfly's body. Oh boy, guys. It's going to be a day, I think. Ugh. You ever have that? You just can't speak? So I glued down my 3 butterflies in a row, and I just kind of held them down in the center so that their wings could stay popped up. Like, this isn't really a card I would mail to anybody, and I didn't add a sentiment because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with the sentiment. I think I'm going to feel it out and decide, and then I'll probably just do a little label and stick it across the middle of the second butterfly and just kind of do a little label. And then I also took 4 colors. I used the 2 that I used to make the background, Spun, Sugar, and Tumbled Glass. And then I also brought in Frayed, Burlap, and Black Soot to just add a little bit of speckles on top of everything once it's done. Not a lot, but just kind of little to kind of tie it all together, because I did pull in Black Soot to do the lettering on the background, and that was the only place I really pulled it in. So I kind of wanted to add a bit more of it onto the card. And then here we've got the craft right behind. You can't see it except for in the areas that I've kind of distressed and pulled in, and then you can see it kind of pretty well, actually. And I love how it kind of goes with the Frayed Burlap spraying on top of that gauze. I just thought that was pretty neat. And then I'm going to glue that down onto our card base, and then I will lift this up and show it to you so you can actually get kind of a better view of this, the whole thing put together. And then that is everything. That is my whole card. I hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to know what you think, as this is something that's a bit out of the norm for me. And yeah, I'd love to have you back. If you want to subscribe, leave me a like, leave me a comment. I would love to know what you think. Thank you so much, guys, and I hope you'll check out the next person in the hop, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye for now.